Welcome back to the Resupply with me, DK,
And me, Than.
bringing you your weekly double tap of all things Laser Force and Space Marines related. So, if you've probably figured out by now, a little bit of a different intro this week because the Podfather himself, Guy Next Door, is not available for today's recording. So we're going to have to go with a brand new team-up scheme where it's just going to be me and Than talking about laser tag stuff, and hopefully we don't lose the podcast before Steve gets back. So we miss you, Steve. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
You know, somehow I think we can probably manage this. I'm just throwing it out there. It's not like we have any trouble talking shit about lasers either.
Those seem like famous last words to me.
I mean, you're not wrong, but, you know.
Well, in any case, we are happy to be coming to you this week, even without our illustrious founder, co-host, and leader Guy Next Door. And we have a very special guest this week. We are going to be talking to somebody we have not had on the podcast, brand new guest. We're bringing in Wombat, all the way from Perth, Australia.
Hi there.
Welcome to the podcast. Appreciate you coming on. Trying to get the scheduling to work for this was definitely a little interesting as far as how many different time zones we were trying to accommodate, but I'm glad that we were able to make it work and bring you on here.
Yeah, it's great. I deal with the time zone thing all the time. Nothing new here.
Well, this was almost a new record for the Resupply in getting together people from Texas, California, Auckland, New Zealand, and all the way out in Western Australia. For those American listeners who, like all Americans, don't have any sense of geography, Perth is all the way on the west coast of Australia, whereas most of those other cities you've heard of are all the way on the east coast. And Australia's big, so it's a long ways away.
But of course,
Sure is.
But of course, Steve-O had to go and screw it up by not being here, so we don't have all four time zones represented. So I'm just gonna blame Steve at this point for us not ticking that box as far as having four time zones all represented with the spacing. So
well, he's not here to defend himself, so that
exactly
is obviously the best option. So why don't we just go ahead and jump into it? Wombat, I know Than and I have known you for a while, at least by reputation, and from talking on the old Laser Force forums and zone message boards and things like that. But why don't you tell all the kids out there a little bit about your background, who you are, and how you got into all this crazy laser tag stuff?
Damn kids.
Yeah. It's quite a long story. I've been in the industry now for 29 years working in the industry and playing for a few years before that. I like to tell people I started when I was 3, just so they can do the math and think I'm a little younger than I am. I actually started at Quasar, which became Qsar, and used to sweep the arena for free games on school holidays and help out and stuff, and eventually was employed for cash. And
that sounds super familiar. That sounds like...
We've all been there.
Yeah, wow. Yep, that sounds like a very common route that most of us got jobs at our various laser tag establishments.
It does seem to be, because the manager at the time said he started that way as well. And I said, oh, cool, I'll be a manager one day. And then now I own 3 stores. So definitely the dream came true in that respect. So from Qsar, they became... the store actually changed to a Zone 3, so that's how I got involved with the Zone. I then, a couple of years later, managed another store that was a Zone, and eventually purchased stores and sort of never looked back. And then we only recently changed over to Laser Force about 5 years ago. So it's quite a different scenario sort of thing, different group of people. But yeah, we haven't looked back really. We're really enjoying it.
Cool. So you guys started with the Gen 7 gear when you opened up, or I guess converted over to Laser Force?
So Gen 7, all 3 stores, and then recently the Malaga store upgraded to Gen 8. Actually, recently, about 10 months ago.
I mean, that's still pretty recent, all things considered. So
True.
Yeah.
And are these all out in Western Australia, all 3 of these stores?
So they're all around Perth.
Okay.
Just sort of an hour and 10 minutes apart in driving time.
That actually
Nice.
sounds so fantastic. Like, okay, so you've got 3 stores that are all owned by someone who, is super into the comp scene, which means that all 3 of them, I'm going to just make an assumption, all probably have a certain level of competitive player base. And when you decide, oh hey, I'm slightly bored with this maze, you've got another one that you can go to that's going to have competition within a relatively reasonable driving distance. That sounds
Uh,
fantastic.
yeah, the players here are very lucky in that way. In respect to other cities in Australia, there are sort of only a few sites that do a league, and you could be driving 2 hours to get between them, or 3 hours. Or more. So, yeah, we do see a lot of overlap between our players. People will often play at 2 sites a season. Occasionally, somebody will do the whole 3, although that gets a bit much, 3 nights a week.
I mean, you're talking to 2 people right now that don't really have a site.
Yeah, some people are
So,
playing at 3 different sites, and some of us don't even have any. You spoiled bastards.
I mean, I can't say that I have no sites, just all the sites that are relatively close to me here in the DFW area are all very much full FEC sites that don't run advanced games and all that fun stuff. So,
Man, I would still play 2 standard games a week. I got to get my fix in somehow, Than. Come on, what are you doing out there?
playing in a band, which takes most of my time.
Playing in bands, mowing the lawn. It's just like a full King of the Hill experience over there in Texas, man.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, you're not wrong. I wish I could argue with that, but you're not wrong.
But okay, so we've already established on this podcast that the players in the Perth area are very lucky to have their choice of 3 different sites in a 10-minute driving distance they can go to, all of which have competitive play because you got Wombat at the helm who is helping to develop the competitive scene out there. So I know recently you guys just finished your Australian laser tag titles. Is that the official name of the event?
Yep, that's correct. Yep, we just all last week. The event ran from Sunday through to Friday, with a Friday night presentation dinner at the site with caterers coming in, and was a really really enjoyable event. It was great to see so much great sportsmanship, which is something I really promote and always have. And people just really really enjoyed the week, and they're already planning their teams for next year.
Wow, impressive. Well, I know both of us got to enjoy the stream a little bit that was on there. We were super impressed with how the stream went with the split screen for the location of the different bases were, the score screen, and then you managed to work in the commentators actually popping up there as well.
Yeah, we really wanted to make it a big deal and make a bit of an impact on the world really with it. And we've seen other people doing it, and we just wanted to do it just that little bit better. We, of course, we don't play much Space Marines, and so we didn't realize where the players would be majority of the time, and so unfortunately we didn't have cameras in those spots. So when it came to the Space Marines games, we were a little bit lacking on visual footage of the play.
Yeah, I only got to see 1 or 2 of them, but yeah, there was not a lot of activity going on at the bases the way there were in the force field games.
Well, and then the other thing that was happening a couple times was like people would camera shift and take the scoreboard off the screen, and it's like, no, bring that back. There's nothing happening on that camera. Bring back the scoreboard. Where's the scoreboard? But that's just that was just me being whiny little bitch at that point, like wanting my scoreboard back because I'm I'm a Laser Force player. I'm used to my scoreboard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're big believers here on the Resupply that anything that's good can usually still be made better. So it was a great thing to see on Twitch. I think you have definitely set the bar, the gold standard, and expectation for what next year is going to look like. So
Accurate. That I would definitely agree with.
Demihawk and Morange and all you guys, you have most of a year to get ready, so it better be at least that good next year.
Yeah, we've actually they've actually been in touch already to get some advice actually on on setting it all up.
Excellent.
And we already have the cameras in at our Port Kennedy store where we're hosting it next year, and we will place some Space Marines and just double check that we've got them in the right places for that, just to get a bit more footage this year around. But what you were saying about them taking the scoreboard away, with it being the first year we've done it and everyone being amateurs, we often needed reminding in the chat to put the scoreboard back up, which was quite hilarious.
Yeah, but
Well, live and learn.
yeah, but also, I mean, I didn't spend a ton of time in the chat, unfortunately, just with the time difference when things were starting. I was like, okay, I might be able to watch for an hour or two, and it's like, okay, I've got a 5:45 a.m. alarm. I need to get some sleep. It was even for the relative lack of SM5 game knowledge and experience. The people that were doing the commentating weren't doing a bad job. And one of the things that I thought was pretty cool is there were definitely times when like they would say something and kind of like ask the chat, like, does anybody know why that happened, or what these max outs are, and the chat was able to provide the answer, and kind of get that two-way learning going back and forth. Oh my god, I sound so corporate right now. Jesus, can't you tell what I do on a daily basis with how I have to talk normally?
Sold out to the man.
Totally, but it pays my bills and it lets me travel, so it's fine. So just from that aspect, and especially with the force field games also, because I know pretty much all of us in watching force field from the the primary laser force side, if you want to call it that, we're watching the force field game kind of going, we don't know what's happening, and we're typing questions into the chats like, what is this, and the commentators were really good about giving us answers. So it was a really cool back and forth where everybody was it felt like everybody was trying to learn from each other, and there wasn't really any of that, oh, this game sucks because it's not XYZ, which honestly I was a little afraid was going to happen within the chat, just
with our
because
community. No.
just because humans. So that was something that I was worried was going to happen, and I didn't really see any of. So that was really cool.
Well, maybe if it was 10 years ago, but we're all old and we've mellowed out now, so
Yeah, there's definitely some rivalry there between the different game formats and the whole zone and laser force thing. But yeah, I was really, really happy with how that all went down as well. And I think we actually learned quite a bit from the people in the chat from US and New Zealand that were helping us out with hints and tips along the way. So I just thought the whole thing was a really, really positive experience. Not only that, we actually had people that were non-players in there, like parents and siblings, who were watching along, finally seeing what their son or daughter is into, and they were asking questions as well, and they really enjoyed it. We got a lot of good feedback from them as well.
we're taking the next step toward being a legitimate spectator sport, so I'm all for it. That's where the money is.
That's right.
Yeah, on ESPN Ocho.
It's all about the Ocho, baby. So how long have you been running the Australian laser tag titles? And did this start with Zone and it just kind of converted over to Force when you made the switch?
No, actually, I was on the founding committee for the Zone national titles, which actually still runs. It's a huge event. But when I switched, I really wanted to get one going in the laser force scene. There didn't seem to be anything big happening in Australia. So in 2015, we had a tournament in Rockhampton in Queensland, and we only had 4 teams, so it was really tiny. The next year, we moved it to Perth, actually to Malaga, where we just hosted again. And so in 2016, I think we had around 10 teams. And then due to personal life, I had to actually step back for a couple of years, and so nothing happened for a couple of years until now, when I was ready to actually get it all going again, and hoping to stick to it. So really hoping that next year we bump over the 10 team mark so we can get back on track to really boost this thing.
That's really cool. So you had 10 teams this last year?
Just 6 teams this year, but it was
Just
10
6 teams,
teams
okay.
in 2016. Yeah. So yeah, we're hoping we can bump over the 10 for next year.
We definitely understand the trying to make it past certain team number hurdles. That's definitely been a thing that we've experienced on our side as well. There was a point where a 6-team tournament was like, oh my god, this is a big tournament. And
Yes,
now,
I remember the second West Coast tournament that we had. We were astounded that we had 6 teams that were all willing to go and play a regional tournament.
so it's nice to see it, see things on both sides, trying to build. I also do understand primary organizer steps back and suddenly nobody steps up to do anything and things go by the wayside. It's funny how that happens sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work goes into running a week-long event, and for people that probably haven't done that sort of thing before, probably don't realize the effort and time it takes, and there's no reward for it in regards to money or anything like that. It's done for the love of it, and a lot of people really just don't want the pressure.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Both of us have been in that thankless job position, so I definitely feel you on that one. But it is for certainly love of the game, as you described. So what formats did you guys play at this year's titles?
So we started the week on the Sunday night with a triples format. So it was 3 people to a team going into the maze, and we sent in, I think it was 6 teams a game, and it was played under DM3 format.
Oh, wow.
So that was just a novelty event. We drew the teams out of a hat, so we sort of put all the visiting players in a hat with some of our weakest players, and then we divided the rest of our players into two hats on ability, and then drew one person from each hat to make the teams. So they were relatively even, which always makes for a great comp. But the idea of that comp is actually just to mingle, to get people playing with people they don't normally play with, and make sure the visiting players get to know some of the local players from the get-go, which alleviates some of that us and them stuff which can cause friction later in the week.
No. Friction at a laser tag tournament between sites? I never.
Well, recently we haven't, but maybe once upon a time.
Once upon a time, yeah. Anyway.
That is a really good point, though, and I think that's a good way to get people involved, to get that social atmosphere kind of working, and to introduce people to the field. I know we had talked about trying to do something like that in conjunction with a tournament, but we just didn't have the time. So I think that's really cool that you guys started off the tournament that way, by getting people to know each other, to learn the field and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's just I've been involved for a long time in tournaments and leagues and stuff, and just finding ways to just sort of bring everyone together in a social way. It's like we also schedule a drinks night. I mean, drinking happens on most nights, but we have special drinks night where we get together at a location and really get to know each other. And we try to schedule that right near the start of the week as well, so that we can create that camaraderie between everyone before we get into the serious games, and people can get a little bit more hot-headed. But actually, realistically, this year I didn't really see any of it, which was really surprising. Especially with 5 of the teams pretty much being mostly local players who have known each other for a long time. It's pretty easy for them to butt heads, but no, it was actually really good.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. Okay, so you started out with DM3, and then we'll move on to after that.
So on the Monday, then we started the 2 team events, which was the Space Marines 5 and Force Field, half day of each, I think, and then that night was drinks night, and then Tuesday was, I think, just Force Field or just Space Marines. And then that night we had our Highlander tournament, which is our solos tournament. Not everyone plays in that because some people don't like. People either love or hate that game.
Accurate.
Yeah, I know that.
And I mean, I like it, but I'm really crap at it against the good players. So I don't play in the tournament one, but I love playing it socially. We're sort of actually toying with ideas of changing that format for next year, but the people who like Highlander will probably be really upset. We're sort of thinking either Gladiator or Color Conquest even.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, so I would really love to try the Color Conquest as a solo tournament.
Yeah, that is actually, it quickly, when it came out in the Laser Force software, became one of my favorite, I guess, quote-unquote, non-competitive games, just as a warm-up game. I think it actually has quite a bit of potential. There's a lot of interesting things to that game.
Yeah, it's a very well-designed game, actually. I also like it as a social game, definitely. And it's and actually even the general public, we often try to throw one in here and there in our public games, and people really enjoy it. So I'm pushing for that, but I don't know whether people will agree with me or not. And then after that, we did doubles, which is played under our force field format, but it's just pairs, and there's 9 or 10 pairs in each game, and there's 4 base targets active. So that's one of the most intense games you can ever play is doubles, because you have only one partner, and then you have like 16, 18 other people as your enemy.
Yeah, that sounds like it could be an interesting format too, and I imagine those base runs can get pretty nerve-wracking there.
Yeah, they do, because each shot you put into the base target, you actually lose points.
Right.
So if you don't get the base cleanly, you can easily end up with a negative score.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening who are not used to the force field or zone emulator or Z game, whatever you guys call it in your catalog format, yeah, that's a major component of the game. Is you lose points for hitting the base until you actually destroy it. So base denial is one of the key things in the game, which is why the cameras were set up in the arena. I can only assume around the base areas, because that's where a lot of the action is going to take place.
That's right, yeah. So the scoring, most of the scoring is based around the bases. So most of the action occurs there. Apart from in our Malaga maze being so big, has a good area to snipe from upstairs, which we also had a camera in so they could flip to it and see who was sniping from up there.
Very cool. Okay, so wow, that is a lot of game formats under that for 6 different teams. That kind of takes me back to the old days of the U.S. tournaments where we would play, 4 or 5 different game formats.
Yeah, but we also only had like 4 teams, so
yeah.
I mean, if
this is true.
You want to put not too fine a point on it. I mean, yeah, you go back to like 2002 and 99 and all that, and yeah, we're playing SM4 and SM5 and D&D all and Masters all in the same tournament. But yeah, there were only 4 teams that we had to cycle through on that, so that made it a lot easier to get through some of the stuff.
It was different. I'll at least say that, but it's good that the players are getting exposure to a lot of different game formats, especially since I know a lot of them are sort of converted zone players. Is that a fair statement?
Very fair statement, yeah.
So have you found that bringing in just the force field format is a good way of getting them used to Laser Force? Does it generate more interest in the other Laser Force games, or is it just kind of we prefer playing that because that's what we're used to?
I think it's they prefer to play that because that's what they're used to. But I also find with when we're recruiting new people, they do find force fields so much easier to comprehend than Space Marines, and Space Marines has so much to it. It's got a huge learning curve where the force field is only a slightly harder version of a public game, really. So it's much easier to convert people to a league player playing that. So and then because everyone's so used to that, it is hard to get them to then commit another night to play Space Marines. So, but after I've had a few messages since the tournament over the weekend, and there's a lot of people really keen for me to make sure we have an ongoing Space Marines tournament. So maybe this will be the start.
Well, and
That'd be cool.
And the difference in learning curve between force field, Z game, standard zone game, however you want to describe it in this context, versus Space Marines 5. I mean, this is definitely something that that we've had discussions between some of us on the pure Laser Force side of the house, because we would look at the zone tournaments, and Australian zone nationals having 20 plus teams, and U.S. zone before it kind of imploded on itself, similar sort of thing, where it would have 25, 30 teams at a tournament, and the discussions of, well, yes, the game does have a lower barrier to entry because at its core it is a more basic game. I'm not saying it's a bad game by any means, but it is at its core a more basic game, and as you say, people can grasp it quicker, whereas you try to bring somebody new into Space Marines 5, there's so many other game knowledge pieces that if they don't have a certain level of gameplay experience with certain other game modes and just being used to certain other things, it's a lot to try to get into somebody's head to start with. I mean, I know when Sacramento originally opened, back in 1997, they tried SM5 at the start, and they were like, nope, this makes no sense. But
Didn't have any idea what we're doing.
but SM4 made great sense. So that was the official league tournament game in Sacramento until at least like mid 1998, before SM5 was even kind of brought back into any type of rotation. So yeah, we totally understand and sympathize with the trying to bring new players into the Space Marines 5 fold, as there's a lot going on, and there's so many little nuances that right off the jump you're just not going to pick up, and it does require a certain number of games in that game type to even start to feel comfortable with it. I don't think I had started feeling comfortable with it until I was at least 50 to 100 games in. And even now, with the more games in than I care to admit, there's still things that I find, nuance-wise, it's like, oh, I should maybe do that instead of this other thing that I was doing.
You still bad, bro.
I am bad. I'm freaking terrible.
Yeah, that's exactly it, sort of thing. There is so many little things that you need to know about the game, and the roles and how it all works, and strategies, and I mean, we also don't really have anyone here that's we do have one player here that's originally from Brisbane.
That'd be Gooby.
So they have, yeah, it's Gooby, yep, and so we have some knowledge, and we used to have a player from Ballarat, but he's moved back to Melbourne. So it's sort of difficult when you don't have those local mentors to sort of get you into the game, and you have to learn it from scratch by yourself.
Yep. Yeah, that was definitely Sacramento originally as well, where it was, you're feeling things out, and you start doing things one way, and then some team of nobodies figures out how to double tap before anybody else, and they win a league that nobody was expecting them to.
Yeah, what a bunch of amateurs.
We
did at least see you guys do that on the stream, so we know you figured out how to double resupply.
Oh yeah,
so you're ahead of where we were.
I actually had a question for you guys. We were we've been toying with different ideas, and has Space Marines always been a 15-minute game?
In the
So
kind
as
of major tournament format, yes, but we have played it as other game lengths when we've been running smaller leagues and things like that. We actually mostly used to play 10-minute Space Marines 5 in Sacramento until we were exposed to kind of the international scene, and 15 minutes kind of became the more standard variation on it.
and there are some game timing and flow. Not actually, timing is the wrong word. There's some game flow reasons why 15 minutes seems to be the ideal length for it. The played at a shorter length, to my mind, usually at about that like 8 to 9 minute mark is usually right about when the game is getting interesting, because the teams have done their initial setups and their initial attacks have happened, and at about that 8 to 9 minute mark is usually when you see the game start turning one way or the other. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. Some games turn really early and they're really quick elims. But as far as the breathability to the game, 15 minutes seems to be the right length for it. There have been ideas, quasi-ish tossed around over the years of changing the game length, but then altering the lives given and shots given and how many lives a nuke takes and stuff like that. But it's always kind of come back to that the game and the positions and everything else is essentially perfectly balanced. I mean, there's some things that may be a little off scale, but by and large, the game is balanced. I think I mentioned on the chat, and I think you were commentating at the time, that I don't think there's been a change made to SM5 in 20 years. And the only change that I can necessarily think of was, I'm pretty sure that a team resupply used to deactivate the entire team, and that went away.
Oh, if so, that was definitely like pre 1997, because that was never the case since we started playing Space Marines.
I was pretty sure it did, but I could be wrong on that. Again, I'm old. I've slept since
Who
then.
knows? Human memory is terribly flawed. So
It is terribly
maybe
flawed.
maybe we can get a Trad or Scorpion on to answer that question. But that is definitely a good question.
But as far as the positions and the hit points and the shot powers and the resupply amounts and all that, like, that has not changed definitely in 20 plus years. So
I was on the stream because I made the comment that I find that it's a really, really well balanced game for all of the roles. Like, every role has its pros and cons, and I'm amazed how balanced that actually is. So I never would want to mess with any of that part of it. But what we were hoping is that maybe it would be suitable to run it at a 12-minute game, just so that we can fit more teams in. I know there's been talk in the international tournament about fitting more teams. They will need to look at some way of finding a way of putting them in. I guess shortening the game time is one way. We were also wondering about why there were matches rather than just games, because obviously in Force Field, with the base targets being so important, you could sort of say that it would be important to do a three-way match in that format. But what we do is we just schedule it so you play every color the same amount of times, and we try and you play the other teams as equal as you can. So we're sort of thinking, could we just do that with Space Marines as well, and not have matches, just have games?
It could work. I mean, you of course can do anything that you want with it, especially for training purposes, just for learning the games and stuff like that. And there isn't a 100% you must do this to run a proper league kind of scenario. But as far as the rationale behind it, I think is basically twofold. One is because in some fields one color is going to play stronger than the other just because of they probably have access to a stronger resupply point that's closer to where they start the game, so that gives them a little bit of an inbuilt advantage, and you want every team to sort of benefit from that equally. And second, just to kind of iron out any potential discrepancies in the vests that are used by either side, that certainly is less of an issue than it used to be, especially with Gen 8, because most of the gear is top of the line and you don't run into the same kind of inconsistencies between the gear that you used to. But that's really the primary rationale for why it is you play from both sides. I guess it would be like flipping sides in the middle of a rugby match or something like that, so that you ensure that the sun is equally in both sides' eyes and nobody benefits from the sun being in any one position, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The reason I'm asking is obviously because you guys have way more experience than we do, and I know over time things change and become a certain way for a certain reason, and I'd rather learn that from someone else than have to learn it for ourselves.
Yeah, so we definitely did in the past play shorter Space Marines games for our own leagues that we had locally, and the game does play different when it's shorter. The kind of end game phase comes a little bit earlier, and eliminations, at least in a lot of fields, are going to be a bit more rare if you shorten the game. That's going to vary a little bit by field though, because as we've learned over the years, some arenas play much faster than others. Like Auckland or St. George probably experience a lot of eliminations. A field like Detroit has relatively few, just by comparison.
At the same time, though, it's actually it's kind of refreshing to hear the oh hey, we know you guys have been doing this for a long time. Let's you know pick your brains and see what we can learn, as opposed to some of the experiences we've had trying to onboard sites where it's like, well, we're going to do our own thing because we, we don't care about this body of history that you've got doing this. Just it does make for kind of a nice change, and the reverse is definitely true as well, because I mean there are definitely things that we do that we do because we've been doing them for a long time, and yes, they work, but sometimes it's also nice to have somebody who doesn't necessarily have the preconceived biases in looking at some of our stuff and going, have you thought about this? And maybe we have, and maybe it's something that's like, okay, we did that prior, and here's XYZ as to why we don't do it that way anymore. But there may also be things where it's like, actually, we've never thought about that. We should try that. So I'm definitely from a getting the best of both worlds, ideas wise, like this. I'm super excited that you guys are more apart, that we're trying to get the scenes integrated and get everybody talking and making sure that we are sharing the ideas around, so that we can make any tournaments that we're running the absolute best things that they can be. Because really, at the end of the day, all of us want a strong tournament scene. All of us want to be able to travel to other places and hang out and talk shit and play lasers with new people. So anything like this to blend things together is only going to be a positive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just sort of, you just got to find that balance between the game being totally playable and enjoyable, and also involving the numbers. Because obviously, if you stick to low numbers, then it's much easier for the scene and the league or tournament to sort of disappear. Because obviously life gets in the way for a lot of people, buying houses, having families, and so if you don't have the bigger numbers to keep it growing and keep it sort of progressing, then yeah, you can sort of easily see it drop off all of a sudden. So yeah, we're just trying to think of ideas of keeping our tournament how it is, but also to just be able to accommodate the extra numbers. I mean, we will come up with a maximum number that we think we can accommodate to keep it all fun. I've got to sit down and still actually calculate that out.
Yeah, there is always some number that's out there. You're like, yeah, it's hard to extend beyond that. But obviously, you do have a little bit more flexibility with either shorter games, more teams in the mix, or running different game formats. So that is one thing we talked about on a previous podcast of not necessarily making this replacing, kind of what we've been doing with Space Marines, but developing a parallel tournament scene where there is an accommodation for more teams that's made. And I think if maybe more of the players at other Laser Force sites see what you guys have been doing, that there can be some of that give and take over, it's not just Space Marines that we can run. There are these other games we could get into, or this might at least give us some kind of template for how do you run a multi-format tournament without feeling like you're sacrificing a lot of the game that you're used to and that you've come to love.
That's exactly right. When we started the zone national titles in Australia, I'd been running leagues for a very long time. We were the strongest league in Australia by far, and the committee would always bring things up and want to make changes that we'd already done in league that were not good. And I would try my heart out to say to them, we've done this, it didn't work, this is why. But still, sometimes they would vote it in, and we'd have a tournament, and then they'd go, "Oh, that didn't work." Well, I did tell you, we have experienced this. Like, I wasn't just making it up because I like things my way. But it's hard. Some people can be so stubborn in wanting to learn things for themselves. But that's why I'm really happy to have the doors open between the groups. The stream, part of the intention of the stream was for that, to sort of showcase what we do and bring everyone sort of closer together, because the scenes are quite different, and but we all still love lasers. That's the key, and it is heaps of fun meeting new people who also love it, and just learning how they play and what they did. There's no wrongs and rights really. It's just it's just about having fun, making friends.
This is very true. I will fully acknowledge and admit that I am kind of a Space Marine snob. That is really what I prefer to play, and by far my favorite game format. But I will be honest. I mean, playing especially on Laser Force gear, playing Force Field or other Zone emulator games, I actually kind of enjoy because it's at least on the gear that I'm used to. So I'm hoping that would be kind of a gateway for other players, because I think it is a good other format for people to learn and experiment with and to learn new tricks and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's still very much team based, and you still need the communication and stuff. So I still think that it's a good stepping stone to learning Space Marines. The only problem is it's pretty bad when you go from Force Field to Space Marines and your medic decides to be aggressive.
That's the problem.
You can direct them back to the podcast series that we did on how to play the 5 different positions in that case, because I'm pretty sure one of the first things I mentioned was, don't go out by yourself when you're the medic.
Yeah.
Unless you're running away to hide in a corner, don't go out and get too many grand ideas about scoring a ton of points. So what can you?
You guys would have really laughed when you saw us play our first Space Marines games when we first switched to Laser Force, because all of the medics just did that. They just ran out and attacked, and their poor team didn't have any lives.
Well, I mean, as much as we would, like to laugh at that, and okay, we're probably going to a little just because of experience. I know when we first started playing Space 5 in Sacramento, we thought it would be a good idea to split the ammo and the medic. So like the ammo would go with like a commander and a scout, and the medic would go with the heavy and the other scout. I don't know why we thought that was a good idea in the initial, but it was definitely
you're always guaranteed something. I mean, if you find at least one of the resupplies, you can get something.
Yeah, so that was definitely a thing that happened. So um, yeah, I mean, I, I do have this mental image of, okay, you're you're just getting the gear, you're playing this game that you've read the stat sheet on, and but you have like no grounding in it. It's like, yep, medics, we're gonna run out and be battle medics, and I mean, I'm gonna guess they figured out pretty quickly that that was not the way to do that. Maybe.
Well,
Well,
maybe
well,
we
probably.
shouldn't knock this then. I mean, after all, if the medics go out and attack early, that means they die earlier, which means the game ends earlier, which means you can get more games in, and we can fit in more teams into the tournament. So maybe we should just force medics to attack.
I hate you so much.
I know. Okay, so what else are some of your reflections or experiences now having run Space Marines in a tournament format here, Wombat?
Um, I think we got a lot to learn. But no, I think actually the two top teams I think did really well. They both did have some Space Marines experience on them. So that's why I guess they stayed out ahead of the other teams.
Mm.
But yeah, it's we just I don't know. We just sort of see where we go. But like I said, there's been interest over the weekend. People sort of saying we need to sort of play it more regularly and stuff. So it's about sort of setting that up now so that in a way that people can make it. I've tried in the past and people were just finding it hard to commit another night to come and play. But I think now that they've played it competitively again, they might make more effort to come along.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, Perth players, make the time. Don't take laser tag for granted, because you never know if it's gonna disappear on you one day.
As all Sacramento players are so painfully aware.
Painfully aware, several times over. Yeah, so I guess
Accurate.
that's a good transition for two things. Is number one, if you are a Perth area player and you are looking to learn more about Space Marines, you want to get maybe a tournament under your belt with some of the more experienced players and learn some of their tricks of the trade, so to speak. I've heard tell there's going to be a tournament in Auckland next year, sometime around July 20th or so.
Yeah, July 20th to July 24th. I mean, if we're really going to be, accurate with the
Yeah.
dates, I mean, really.
This is not an official resupply announcement, by the way, because of course we would never take that away from Guy Next Door from being able to make the official announcement. But I've heard tell there might be a tournament in Auckland around that time.
I had heard that too, actually.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad that that word has traveled. So, do you? But serious question: do you think there would be interest in getting a team of six or even more than six, maybe getting multiple teams out from your side of the country to cross all the way over the outback and then out into the sea to travel to New Zealand?
I have shared the event with the players. They're all pretty exhausted from our tournament, so I don't think they're thinking that far ahead. But um,
Ah,
I
quitters, come on.
believe I there is a lot of our players still play in the zone tournament as well, which is early in the year around March. And there's also a world tournament that there's a talk that there's a team from WA going to.
Very
Not
cool.
sure how well they might fit it in, but I'll definitely be keeping it in their sights. Be really nice if we could get a team to attend, actually.
Yeah, we would love to have you guys. It's been a while since we've brought in a new site into our little club, so to speak. So we'd love to have at least some of you guys come out, experience the tournament, and get some new blood in there. And by the same token, I've heard also some tell that you guys might be doing another similar kind of tournament, maybe right around the same time.
Yeah, so we currently have it scheduled for the week after the New Zealand tournament, hoping that some of the players from that tournament might find it easy to jump over here to Perth
Well, hey,
to
what a coincidence!
give ours a go. Yeah, but I also heard murmurs this morning about a bus tour being organised in New Zealand. So for the week after, so that kind of clashes a little. So we're actually looking at actually possibly moving our tournament to the week before the New Zealand tournament, just so anyone who is interested can then attend all three events.
Wow, you guys are just really trying to make me spend my whole paycheck traveling all throughout the southern hemisphere, it looks like.
They really are, man.
Well, I mean, you travel all this way, why not, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for people who have no sense of geography, Perth has only got to be like a 2 hour flight from Auckland, right? Wink, wink.
Uh, just a little more. Actually, people on the East Coast can fly to Auckland cheaper than they can fly to Perth. It's a bit of a joke. You guys probably don't know that in Australia we consider New Zealand just another state of Australia.
Yeah, I could see that.
No, I'm painfully aware of that because I lived in Auckland for 4.5 years, so I am well aware of damn Australians just thinking that New Zealand's just another state for them to show up in and work and all that good stuff.
That's correct.
Just popping over for the weekend. Bunch of jerks. Yeah, for relative geography for Americans who are listening to this podcast, basically, if you've been to Brisbane or Sydney, going to Perth is would be like traveling from New York to Los Angeles in the States. So it's not just a quick hop, skip, and a jump over. Plus, I mean, New Zealand, you got to tack on another couple hours to get from the east coast of Australia. So it would be a bit of a time commitment, but at least speaking for myself, I know there is the interest there. Now, whether or not I have the funds and the time off and everything else to coordinate getting there would be a little bit of a different issue, but I definitely want to get some of our players to potentially return the favor, get over and see what the Australian laser tag titles are all about, because I think that would be a great experience too.
Yeah, we've actually also had interest from the UK and Germany, I think it was as well. So I mean, it'd be pretty cool if we saw players from those countries visiting as well.
Yeah, I think you guys would have a better claim to being a world tournament than we do. So I guess we have to catch up here pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, there's something to drop in for all you US and Australian and New Zealand players who are listening to this podcast is keep it under your hat sometime around the Auckland Nats. If you have the time and the funds and you want to make the commitment to go out to Perth, you have the opportunity to play two laser tag tournaments in the span of 3 weeks, which sounds really good to me right now. So before
Yeah.
we finish up here for the day, Wombat, who do you want to give some shout outs to? We haven't actually discussed who won your tournament, so who do you want to honor here on the podcast so they can be immortalized on the resupply?
Uh, none of them really. No. Um,
Shots fired.
I'll just take all the claim to fame. Um, having all the tournaments is there's quite a few winners really. That's another advantage of having the multiple tournaments is there's not just one winner at the end of the week as well. Well, hopefully. You never know. We did have different winners of the two team events. Krakens took out Forcefield and Gators took out the Space Marines. Gators were lucky enough to have Gooby from Brisbane on their team, and also her sister Pop Tart, who was visiting from Brisbane, who's also played at Brisbane. So they had
Look at
two.
these lousy Brisbane ringers coming in and messing up everybody's tournaments.
That's right. And Brisbane sent a team to the previous two events, and they massacred in Space Marines, of course. And they held their own in Forcefield. They didn't win, but they definitely held their own in there because they're still laser tag players. They still know how to pew pew.
Very true.
Yeah,
And then how about your Highlander and your doubles event? So we can
Yep.
narrow it down here.
So Highlander was taken out by Ex Prodigy, who's actually previously known as Gamer. He played in the previous titles at Malaga under the name Gamer. He actually plays every week at least once and comes to our super sessions where we do play Highlander, so he's had plenty of practice. But he actually performed really, really well in this tournament and shocked a lot of people. So hat off to him. He really deserved it and did very, very well. Triples was taken out by Gooby, Method, and Chook was visiting us from Melbourne. You may have seen his name around the
Yes.
tracks as well for the years.
Yep.
He is better known as Suicidal Chicken was his.
Yeah.
Yep, I am definitely familiar with that name. I've never met him, but I've seen I've seen the name enough over the years, and Night Owl from Oakley has mentioned his name more than a few times. So yeah, I'm familiar with the name.
He's played on. He has no problem playing on any of the equipment. So I believe he's played Laser Force tournaments back in his younger days. So yeah, it's great along. I've known Chook for a very long time, mostly on the zone scene, but he's really taken a liking to the Laser Force scene. And the final one was doubles, which was taken out by Method and Flash. Those two as a pair here in WA, they're just unstoppable. If they pair up for our normal league, it doesn't matter who the other three players on the team are. They seem to take out the league. We thought about introducing a rule that they can't play together, just so that doesn't happen.
Well, it looks like you might have your beginnings of your Space Marines team there. If they have any aptitude for that, maybe put them as a couple of 3-hits, and you got a good tandem going.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, very cool. Congrats to all the winners on that front. It's good to get some new names on the podcast here, and hopefully we'll be able to put some names or some faces to those names here before too long.
Yeah, I think we'll see a lot more sort of interaction between the groups over the years to come, and Germany and UK seem very keen on coming on board too. So that would be awesome to actually have players from all those countries attending the different events around the world, and also even to go and play at the tournament in Germany. They had sent us some photos, and it looks like they have a good following there. So I'm keen to learn more about what they do, and maybe one day make it there.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to cross off that play in 5 different countries achievement some way, right?
That's right.
Which is way harder to do if you don't live in Europe.
Yeah, but it's not impossible. Just ask Rack.
True. I didn't say it was impossible. I just said it was way harder if you don't live in Europe.
Even harder when you live in Australia.
Especially Western Australia. Then you don't even get New Zealand.
That's right. We just don't live near anyone.
But hey, you guys got some lovely coastline and stuff like that I've seen in pictures. So would certainly love to get out there to take in the scenery if nothing else. So anything else you want to tell the listeners out there?
No, nothing really. I think we covered everything that I was thinking of covering. So I just sort of encourage anyone that may stumble upon this podcast who doesn't currently play in a tournament or league in their local area to get involved with lots of friendly people, and it's good fun, a great community to be involved in.
Yep, and to that note, we have just recently made the Laser Force Tournaments page and group on Facebook is now public if you search for it. So we're hoping to get a lot more people involved in that, and you can learn more about Laser Force Tournaments, whether it's Australian titles or the Auckland Space Marines tournament we're going to run next year, or other regional tournaments. This is our best way to expand the scene. So thanks so much for coming on, Wombat. It's great talking to you.
Yeah, it was great to meet you guys and be a part of it after listening to a few of the podcasts. I'm still trying to work my way through them all.
Well, there are definitely a few of them. So depending upon how far back you went, you've got listening material for a while.
Yeah, that's for sure. I've listened to a few recent ones, and then I decided to go back to the start. I've got a bit to listen to.
Well, I think they really only kind of got good probably about last year during the Brisbane tournament when they were bringing on a new co-host on a little bit more of a regular basis. I think the podcast really took an uptick at that point.
You need to shut the fuck up. I am going to fucking stab you the next time I see you. I swear to God.
Well, I think that's a good place to leave off for the week. So, for the Resupply, and in place of Guy Next Door, I've been DK.
And I've been Than.
Always remember to backtrack, keep your gun up, and buy travel insurance, kids. See you later.